My name is Olivia Bennett, and the day my mother died was the day my entire world collapsed. For as long as I can remember, she was my safe place, my source of guidance, the one who seemed to hold all the answers to life's hardest questions. Losing her felt like losing not just a parent, but the very foundation of who I was. Her funeral was held on a cold, gray morning, the kind of morning where even the sky seemed to mourn, heavy with low clouds and a biting wind. I stood at the edge of the grave, clutching damp soil in my hands, my heart pounding as if it might break free from my chest. Around me, voices blurred into a low hum as the priest spoke of love, family, and eternal rest. But his words couldn't reach me. All I could hear was the echo of her voice in my mind, soft, comforting, familiar. To the world, she had been a respectable woman, admired for her kindness and dignity. To me, she was simply Mom, the one who stayed awake with me when fevers wouldn't break, who celebrated my smallest victories as though they were monumental, who reminded me, with a look or a touch, that I was never alone. As the final prayers ended and people began drifting away, I stayed behind. I whispered into the wind, barely able to speak through my tears. How do I keep going without you? The silence gave me no answer. Back at the house, grief wrapped around me like a heavy blanket. Every corner of her home breathed with her presence. Her perfume lingered on her scarves, her handwriting filled recipe cards in the kitchen, and her half-finished crossword lay waiting on the nightstand. The thought of boxing up her life felt unbearable, but I knew I couldn't avoid it forever. So, one evening, I sat on her bedroom floor, surrounded by open boxes. I folded her sweaters, sorted through her photographs, and held her jewelry in my hands as though it could still hold her warmth. I told myself this was closure, the final act of saying goodbye. But I was wrong. Hidden among those belongings were secrets my mother had carried to her grave. Secrets that would unravel everything I thought I knew about her, and everything I thought I knew about myself. Grief has a strange way of guiding your hands. One moment you're folding clothes, whispering memories into sweaters that still carry the scent of lavender and soap, and the next you're reaching for a drawer you never thought to open before. That's how it happened to me. I wasn't looking for anything. I was simply trying to pack away what remained of my mother's life. But instead, I stumbled upon something that would unravel everything I thought I knew. It was late in the evening. The house was quiet, filled only with the ticking of the old clock in the hallway. I sat cross-legged on the floor of my mother's bedroom, surrounded by half-filled boxes. My hands were tired, my eyes swollen from hours of crying, but something inside me wouldn't let me stop. I opened the bottom drawer of her desk, the one she always kept locked. The tiny brass key had been taped beneath her jewelry box, as if she expected me to find it someday. The drawer slid open with a creak, and at first I saw nothing unusual. Old letters, faded photographs, neatly stacked documents. But as I sifted through them, I noticed a thick envelope at the very back, yellowed with age and sealed with my mother's careful handwriting. On the front, in her elegant script, were the words, "For Olivia." When the time is right, my breath caught. My fingers trembled as I held the envelope. The paper was fragile, the ink faded, but the weight of it felt immense, heavier than the jewelry boxes or photo albums I had already packed. Why had she written this? Why had she never given it to me while she was alive? I hesitated for several minutes, staring at her handwriting. A part of me wanted to tuck it back where I had found it, to leave whatever secrets it contained buried with her. But another part, a stronger part, knew I had to open it. I had to know. When I finally broke the seal, a bundle of papers slid into my lap. At first glance, they looked like official documents, birth certificates, hospital records. My heart hammered in my chest as I scanned the names. One of them was mine, but another wasn't. Another child. I froze, staring at the certificate. Same last name, same mother's name, but a different first name. Daniel Bennett, date of birth, 3 years before mine. I read it again and again, my eyes blurring with tears. It didn't make sense. I had grown up as an only child. My mother had always told me it was just the two of us against the world. There had never been any mention of a brother. Beneath the certificates were letters, handwritten notes from my mother. My hands shook as I unfolded the first one. To my son, Daniel. I hope someday you will understand why I made the choices I did. I pray that one day your sister will know about you, and maybe she will forgive me. Sister? The word hit me like a bolt of lightning. My chest tightened, and the room seemed to tilt around me. I wasn't an only child. I had a brother my mother had hidden from me for my entire life. Tears blurred the ink as I held the letter against my chest, my mind spinning with questions. Who was he? Where was he now? Why had she kept him a secret? And what did this mean about the woman I thought I knew so well? That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the document spread out on the nightstand beside me. The weight of her secret pressed down on me, reshaping my grief into something darker, heavier. I wasn't just mourning my mother anymore. I was mourning the truth I thought I had about her, about myself, about our family. I had spent my life believing I was her only child. Now, with one discovery, everything had changed. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. I always believed grief was the cruelest pain a person could endure. But in the days after finding those papers, I realized there was something even sharper, something that cut far deeper. Doubt. Doubt doesn't just live quietly in the corners of your mind. It crawls into every thought, poisons every memory, makes you question everything you once trusted. That's what it did to me. For 32 years, I had lived with the story my mother gave me, that I was her only child, that she had raised me alone after my father left, that we were two against the world. It was simple, clean, and easy to hold on to. But now, with one set of documents and a handful of letters, that story had collapsed. Every memory I had with her began to shift in my mind, as if seen through cracked glass. I thought back to the nights when I asked her why she never had more children, and she would smile softly and say, "One is enough for me." I remembered how she always looked away quickly when people mentioned siblings or big families, brushing off the topic with a laugh. At the time, I thought nothing of it. Now, those moments felt like red flags, warnings I had been too blind to see. I sat at the kitchen table for hours, spreading the documents out in front of me like pieces of a puzzle I didn't know how to solve. My mother's neat handwriting stared back at me from the letter addressed to Daniel, the brother I never knew existed. The words were filled with guilt, longing, and regret. She had wanted me to know about him someday, but when? And why not while she was alive? I tried to imagine her reasons. Maybe she had been young, scared, overwhelmed. Maybe circumstances had forced her to give him up. But why keep it a secret from me? Why let me grow up believing I was alone in the world, when all along I had a brother somewhere out there? That question gnawed at me. The next morning, I sat in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection. I searched my own features, my dark eyes, my strong jawline, the freckles across my nose, and wondered if someone else out there had the same traits. Was Daniel tall like me? Did he share our mother's smile? Or was he a stranger in every possible way? And more terrifyingly, did he even know I existed? The thought consumed me. If he had known, why hadn't he come looking for me? If he hadn't known, then what life had he been living all these years? Had he felt abandoned? Had he grown up resenting a mother who left him behind while she raised me? And what would he think if he learned the truth, that I had lived in comfort, in love, in the safety of her arms, while he had been denied all of it? For the first time in my life, I felt ashamed of my childhood, ashamed of the warmth and stability I had taken for granted, because now I knew it had come at someone else's expense. Someone who should have been sitting next to me at the dinner table, blowing out candles with me on birthdays, sharing secrets late at night. The guilt ate at me, even though logically I knew it wasn't my fault. I hadn't asked to be her only child. I hadn't asked her to keep Daniel a secret. But guilt doesn't listen to logic. It lingers like a shadow. I tried to distract myself, to bury the documents in a drawer and convince myself that the past was the past, and nothing could change it now. But I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the name Daniel Bennett written in faded ink. Every time I walked through the house, I felt as though the walls themselves were whispering his absence. At night, I tossed and turned, hearing my mother's voice in my head. "One is enough for me." Those words no longer felt like love. They felt like a lie. I started to resent her, and that realization tore me apart more than anything else. For my entire life, I had idolized my mother, painting her as a woman of strength and sacrifice. But now I saw her differently. I saw the cracks in her story, the shadows in her choices. I wanted to scream at her for leaving me with this secret, for burdening me with the truth when she was no longer here to explain it. But she was gone, and the only person who could answer my questions was Daniel, the brother I had never met. The idea terrified me. What if he hated me? What if he wanted nothing to do with me? What if opening this door destroyed the last fragile pieces of my family that still remained? And yet the more I thought about it, the more I realized I had no choice. The truth was already out. It had already lodged itself in my heart, demanding answers. I had spent my life believing I was alone. Now I knew I wasn't, and I couldn't rest until I found him. The longer I sat with the truth, the heavier it became. The documents were undeniable. My mother had another child, a son named Daniel. But the reasons behind it were a mystery. Why had she hidden him? Why had she never told me? Those questions grew louder every day until I knew I couldn't carry them alone anymore. I needed answers, and the only people who might have them were the rest of my family. It took me nearly a week to gather the courage. Grief still clung to us all, and I hated the thought of opening wounds at a time when everyone was already raw. But the secret had been gnawing at me, and silence wasn't an option. So one Sunday afternoon, I drove to my Aunt Margaret's house, where the family had gathered for coffee and cake, the way we often did after church. The moment I walked in, I felt their eyes on me, sympathetic, heavy with pity. "How are you holding up, Olivia?" they asked. I forced a smile, answered politely, but inside I was barely breathing. As we sat in the living room, surrounded by old photographs and the smell of cinnamon tea, I decided to stop dancing around the subject. My hands shook as I placed the envelope on the table. "There's something I need to ask," I said, my voice trembling. "Something about Mom?" The room grew still. My aunt's eyes flicked to the envelope, then back to me. "What is it, dear?" I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. Did my mother have another child? A son? The silence that followed was deafening. My cousins exchanged nervous glances. My aunt pressed her lips together, her teacup rattling as she set it down. Finally, she sighed. I wondered when this would come out. Her words made my stomach drop. "So it's true," I whispered. She nodded slowly. "Yes, your mother had a son. His name was Daniel, but she never spoke of him once she left that part of her life behind." My chest tightened. Why? Why keep him a secret from me? Why pretend I was an only child? Aunt Margaret's eyes softened with sorrow. "Your mother made a choice when she was very young. She had Daniel when she was barely more than a girl herself. Things were complicated. The circumstances weren't kind. She gave him up, but she never forgave herself for it. By the time she had you, she had decided she couldn't live with the shame anymore. So she tried to bury it." Her words stabbed at me like knives. Shame? I grew up thinking we were so close that she told me everything. How could she keep something like this from me? "Because she loved you," Margaret said gently. "She wanted to protect you. Maybe from the pain, maybe from the truth. I don't know. But she carried that secret all her life." I felt my throat tighten, hot tears stinging my eyes. "Did any of you know? Did you all keep it from me too?" No one met my gaze. The silence was its own answer. I stood abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. "So all of you let me live a lie. All of you knew I had a brother, and no one thought I deserved to know. Olivia, my uncle tried to say, his voice thick with guilt, it wasn't our secret to tell. But that did nothing to ease the rage burning in my chest. Then whose was it? She's gone now, and I'm the one left with this mess, with a brother I've never met, with questions I can't ask her anymore. My aunt reached for my hand, but I pulled away. I couldn't stand the sympathy in her eyes. I couldn't stand the thought that they had all protected my mother's secret, while I, the person it mattered to most, had been left in the dark. I left the house in tears, the envelope clutched tightly to my chest. Their half-truths, their evasions, their shame, it only confirmed what I already knew. The secret was real. Daniel was real. And if I wanted real answers, I would have to find him myself. After leaving my aunt's house that day, my emotions swung violently between rage, grief, and disbelief. I had heard the truth from her lips, confirmation that Daniel existed, but a part of me still struggled to fully accept it. Words could be denied, twisted, or softened. What I needed was something solid, something undeniable, something that would erase the last fragment of doubt gnawing at me. The envelope I had found in my mother's desk still sat on my nightstand, haunting me. For days I resisted reopening it, afraid of what else I might find inside. But one sleepless night, with the house silent and my mind refusing to quiet, I gave in. I turned on the lamp, slid the papers back into my lap, and began sifting through them more carefully than before. That's when I found it, a folded hospital record I hadn't noticed the first time. My heart stopped as I read the words. Mother's name, Evelyn Bennett. Child's name, Daniel Bennett. Date of birth, May 14th, 1987. Place of birth, St. Mary's Hospital. There it was, black ink on yellowed paper, my mother's name right next to his. The paper shook in my hands. There was no mistaking it. This wasn't a misunderstanding, a rumor, or an exaggeration. My mother had given birth to a son 3 years before she had me. He was my brother, flesh and blood, hidden from me for my entire life. Tears blurred the words as I traced her signature at the bottom of the document. I had seen that handwriting 1,000 times, on birthday cards, on shopping lists, on notes she used to stick to the fridge. But here it was tied to a secret she had never trusted me to know. I pressed the paper to my chest, whispering into the darkness. Why, Mom? Why didn't you tell me? But silence answered me. The record wasn't the only piece of proof. Beneath it, tucked between folded letters, I found a faded photograph. My mother stood in a hospital gown, her hair damp with sweat, exhaustion in her eyes, but in her arms, wrapped in a thin blanket, was a newborn baby boy. His tiny face was barely visible, but I could see the shape of his nose, the softness of his lips. My throat tightened as I realized I was staring at my brother for the first time. The back of the photo had a single line written in my mother's script. Daniel. My firstborn. I broke down completely then. Sobs tore through me as I clutched the photograph to my chest. It was one thing to read a name on a document, but to see him, small, fragile, held in the arms of the woman I thought told me everything, was devastating. When I finally managed to calm myself, I spread everything across the table, the birth certificate, the hospital record, the letters, the photo. I stared at them for hours, the truth pressing into me with every glance. There was no way to deny it anymore. My mother had lived 2 lives, the one she shared with me and the one she buried in silence. And now that silence was mine to carry. Over the next few days, I started searching for traces of Daniel. I dug through old address books, scanning for names I didn't recognize. I pored over stacks of letters, hoping one might hold a return address. I even found a few receipts from long ago with unfamiliar names scribbled in the margins. They might have meant nothing, but in my desperation, every detail felt like a clue. Late at night, I sat at my computer, typing his name into search engines, scrolling endlessly through records and social media profiles. There were dozens of men named Daniel Bennett, each one a possibility, each one a stranger who might carry my blood. It was overwhelming, but I couldn't stop. The proof I had found wasn't just evidence, It was a calling. I had spent my entire life believing I was alone. Now I knew I wasn't. Somewhere out there, Daniel was living a life that had been hidden from me, and I couldn't rest until I found him. The moment I accepted that Daniel was real, my life shifted. It was as if the ground beneath me had tilted, and every step I took was now leading toward him, whether I was ready or not. Proof wasn't enough anymore. I had to find him. I had to know who he was, what kind of life he lived, and most of all, why my mother kept him from me. The search began quietly, almost clumsily. I wasn't a detective, just a woman armed with grief, anger, and a name that felt both familiar and foreign. Daniel Bennett. 2 simple words. But when I typed them into search bars, they splintered into hundreds of results. Men of every age, from every state, living lives that may or may not have been tied to me. I spent hours at my laptop, scrolling through profiles, squinting at grainy photos, trying to imagine if any of them could share my blood. Some were married with children, others seemed restless and wandering. A few had no trace of themselves online at all. Each time I thought I might have found him, disappointment followed. But I refused to give up. I visited the local library, pulling out microfilm records, scanning old newspapers from the year of his birth. The name appeared a few times in birth announcements, but none matched the hospital I had seen in the documents. I went to the county clerk's office, requesting every public record I could legally access. The clerks were polite, sometimes even sympathetic, but the trail was scattered, fragmented. Every night, I came home exhausted, my dining table still covered with documents, notes, and printouts. It looked like the headquarters of someone obsessed, and maybe I was. One evening, I decided to call St. Mary's Hospital, the place where Daniel had been born. My voice shook as I asked if they had records from 1987. The receptionist hesitated, transferred me to another department, then another. Finally, an older-sounding woman spoke gently, as though she already knew what I was looking for. "I'm afraid birth records that old are sealed," she explained. "We can't release them to anyone but the biological parent or the child himself." The word stung. The child himself. Daniel. He could request his own records, but I couldn't. I was so close, yet the law held me back. That night I sat in the dark of my living room, feeling the weight of helplessness. For the first time since beginning the search, I wondered if I would ever find him. Maybe my mother's silence had been her way of sparing me the pain of a dead end. But then I looked again at the photo. The baby in her arms wasn't just a symbol of her past. It was my brother. He was real, and somewhere out there he was alive. That thought rekindled the fire inside me. I decided to take a new approach. Instead of relying only on documents, I turned to people. My Aunt Margaret had admitted the truth, but she hadn't told me everything. There were still gaps, unanswered questions, pieces of the story she had refused to reveal. I called her the next day, my tone firmer than before. "Aunt Margaret," I said, my voice steady, "I need more than confirmation. I need details. Who took him in? Where did he go? Did anyone in the family stay in contact?" There was silence on the other end, then a sigh. "Olivia, your mother wanted this secret buried." "Well, she's not here anymore," I snapped, my anger spilling over. "I'm the one left with this." I deserved to know. Her voice softened. "I'll see what I can find. Give me some time." It wasn't the full truth, but it was something. Days stretched into weeks, and in that time I kept digging. I contacted old neighbors who had known my mother when she was young. Some remembered her being different for a while, withdrawn, secretive, before she suddenly left town for a few months. Others claimed they knew nothing. But each conversation added tiny fragments to the picture. A girl burdened with a secret, a child who vanished into someone else's care, and a silence that thickened with time. Then, one afternoon, an envelope arrived in the mail with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with handwriting I immediately recognized as Aunt Margaret's. "Your mother arranged an adoption through a private family. The father was never involved. Daniel grew up in the same state, though not in our town. I don't know if he knows he was adopted." Be careful, Olivia. The truth isn't always kind. My heart pounded as I read the words. It wasn't much, but it was more than I had before. Daniel hadn't disappeared into the void. He had lived nearby all along. For the first time, I felt that the invisible thread between us was pulling tighter, drawing me closer to him. The search was no longer just about documents and whispers. Now it was about finding a living, breathing person. My brother. Every search before had felt like wandering in circles, chasing shadows, bumping into walls. But when Aunt Margaret's letter arrived, hinting that Daniel had been adopted locally, I felt the ground shift beneath me. For the first time, there was direction, a thread to follow. I wasn't just digging through endless names on the internet anymore. I was looking for a man who had lived his whole life closer to me than I'd ever imagined. I reread her note a dozen times, clinging to every word. Same state, private adoption, doesn't know if he knows. Each phrase carried both hope and dread. If Daniel didn't even know he had been adopted, what right did I have to tear open his life with this revelation? But then another thought silenced my hesitation. He is my brother, my blood, my family. Didn't we both deserve the truth? Fueled by that determination, I started with adoption agencies. I called every office in the county, asking questions I wasn't even sure I was allowed to ask. Most ended in polite rejections or red tape. But one late afternoon, after being transferred for the third time in a single call, a weary-sounding clerk gave me something different. Private adoptions are difficult to trace, she said, but if you know the mother's name, sometimes records are cross-referenced. You said Evelyn Bennett? Yes, I whispered, my heart pounding. There was a pause, the sound of keys tapping in the background. Then, there was a placement in 1987, male infant, finalized in June of that year. The adoptive parent's last name was Hartwell. The word hit me like lightning. It was the first real surname connected to Daniel's new life. Do you have more information? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm not authorized to share addresses, she replied gently. But public records are, well, public. If you look into the Hartwell family from around that time, you may find what you're looking for. I thanked her quickly, barely managing to end the call before tears filled my eyes. I finally had a lead. That evening, I buried myself in research, searching every Hartwell listed in the state. I combed through phone directories, online databases, even scanned old yearbooks archived by the library. Dozens of Hartwells appeared, but one family name kept resurfacing in the right county: Richard and Elaine Hartwell. They had been active in local charities, mentioned in newspapers, and once even photographed for a community feature about adoption. My hands trembled as I enlarged the grainy newspaper scan. There they were, Richard, Elaine, and a little boy, no more than 2 years old, with dark hair and wide eyes. The caption read, "The Hartwell family, advocates for children's programs." I stared at the boy's face, my chest tightening. Was that Daniel? My Daniel? The resemblance was impossible to confirm, but something in the shape of his eyes tugged at me. They reminded me of my own. I printed the photo and pinned it to my wall. Beneath it, I wrote the name in bold letters, Hartwell. The next days blurred into obsessive searching. I learned that the Hartwells had lived just 2 towns away, no more than an hour's drive from where I grew up. My mother had kept him so close all along. The cruelty of it stung, knowing she had lived her life with me, while her first child was just a short drive away, living under a different name, in a different family. Through voter registration and property records, I pieced together fragments of their lives. They had stayed in the same house for decades. Richard had passed away 5 years ago. Elaine, now in her 60s, still lived there. And Daniel Hartwell, appeared to have moved out several years back. His name showed up in college records, then in a business registry for a small construction company. He was real. He was alive. I sat at my desk late into the night, staring at his name on the screen. Daniel Hartwell. No longer just Bennett. A man with his own life, his own family, his own identity. My heart raced with a mix of excitement and fear. I had what I wanted. I had what I wanted, the first concrete lead. But with it came a flood of new questions. What if he didn't want to know me? What if my presence only reopened wounds he didn't even know existed? What if he hated the mother who gave him up, and by extension hated me? But beneath all the doubts was a quiet, unshakable truth. I couldn't stop now. I had found him, at least his name, his shadow, his path. The next step would be the hardest of all, deciding whether to reach out or to simply stand at the edge of his world, forever wondering. That night, I lay awake, the printed photo of the Hartwell family glowing faintly on the wall under my lamp. For the first time, Daniel didn't feel like a ghost from the past. He was real, and he was closer than ever, and I knew I would find him. The night I discovered Daniel's adoptive last name, Hartwell, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with images of a man I had never met, but who had always existed, just out of reach. I thought of his childhood, his teenage years, his first job, his first heartbreak, all moments I should have known, should have shared, but instead had been erased from my life by a secret I never asked to carry. By morning, I had made my decision. I couldn't spend the rest of my life scrolling through documents, squinting at photographs, and wondering. I needed to see him with my own eyes, even if I never spoke a word to him, even if he never knew who I was. Through endless searches, I learned that Daniel's construction business had an office in a nearby town, about 45 minutes from where I lived. They specialized in residential renovations, with a modest website listing phone numbers, services, and even customer testimonials. I clicked through every page, memorizing the details, until finally I found what I wanted: a recent photo of the team, smiling in front of a half-finished house. There he was. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Daniel. He looked to be in his mid-30s now, his frame broad, his expression confident but warm. His hair was dark, like mine, and his eyes carried the same depth I saw in the mirror every morning. It was subtle, but the resemblance was undeniable. I stared at that photo for hours, tracing the lines of his face, committing every detail to memory. This was him. My brother. The ghost from my mother's hidden past, standing under the sun with a hammer in his hand and a smile that seemed both familiar and foreign. I printed the photo, folded it carefully, and slipped it into my bag. And then I did something reckless. I drove to the address listed on the website. The drive was a blur, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly they ached. My heart pounded with every passing mile, torn between anticipation and dread. What if I saw him, and he was nothing like I imagined? What if he was cruel, or bitter, or uninterested in strangers? Or worse, what if I looked at him and felt nothing? When I arrived, the office was small, a single-story building with a gravel parking lot. My stomach twisted as I sat in the car, staring at the door. People came and went, carrying clipboards, loading tools into trucks. And then, I saw him. Daniel walked out of the office, laughing with another worker, his voice carrying across the lot. My chest tightened, tears blurring my vision. There he was, flesh and blood, just a few yards away. For a moment, I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. He didn't look like a stranger. He looked like family. I stayed in the car, frozen, gripping the steering wheel as though it anchored me to reality. Every instinct screamed to get out, to run up to him, to say the words that had been building in my chest. I'm your sister. But fear held me back. What if he looked at me with confusion, with denial, with anger? What if I shattered his life the way my mother's secret had shattered mine? So I stayed hidden, watching. He was kind to his co-workers, offering to carry something heavy for one of them. He spoke with easy authority, but not arrogance. He seemed grounded, solid, the kind of man I could imagine being proud to know. My heart ached with longing. Minutes turned into an hour. I watched him move between tasks, answer phone calls, scribble notes on paper. To everyone else, he was just Daniel Hartwell, the construction manager. To me, he was so much more. He was the missing piece of my life, the brother I had been denied. But the closer I sat, the further away he felt. Because how do you bridge decades of silence with a single word? As the sun dipped lower, I finally started the engine, my hands trembling. I couldn't bring myself to step out of the car, not yet. Seeing him had been overwhelming, almost unbearable in its intensity. I had crossed paths with my brother for the first time, but it wasn't enough. Driving away, I promised myself this wasn't the end. It couldn't be. I had seen him. I had proof that he was alive, thriving, real. And now, more than ever, I knew I had to find the courage to make contact. For days after seeing Daniel with my own eyes, I lived in a fog. I replayed every detail of that afternoon in my head, the way he laughed, the way he carried himself, the way he looked so effortlessly at home in a life that was both his and, in some strange way, connected to mine. I had thought watching from a distance would be enough, that maybe just knowing he was alive, safe, and seemingly happy would bring me peace. But the truth was, it only made the ache worse. Every morning, I woke with the same gnawing thought. He is so close, and yet I am still a stranger to him. I began driving past his office more often, as though proximity itself might bring clarity. Some days I sat in the car for hours, just to catch a glimpse of him leaving for a job site, or laughing with his team. Once I saw him walk into a cafe across the street, holding a coffee cup in one hand and a set of blueprints in the other. He looked so normal, so grounded, and I sat there trembling, my hand on the door handle, nearly pushing it open. But fear always pulled me back. Fear of rejection. Fear of destroying whatever stability he had. Fear of hearing the words, "I don't want you in my life." But each time I walked away, the weight grew heavier. My silence was becoming unbearable, like a stone pressing down on my chest. One evening, I sat in my mother's old chair, holding the photograph of her with baby Daniel. Her tired eyes, his tiny face, the word firstborn scrawled on the back, it all pierced me like it had the first time. My mother's choice had shaped both our lives. She had silenced his existence for decades, but in doing so, she had also silenced part of me. I realized then, if I stayed quiet, I was repeating her mistake. I was abandoning him all over again. That thought broke me. Tears poured down my face as I whispered aloud, "I can't let you be a secret anymore, Daniel." Not to me, not to the world. The breaking point came the next morning. I woke restless, unable to sit still. I tried making coffee, reading emails, folding laundry, mundane tasks that normally grounded me. But everything felt pointless, like the world was holding its breath, waiting for me to act. By noon, I found myself back in the car, driving toward his office without fully deciding to. My heart pounded as the building came into view, sunlight glinting off the trucks in the lot. I parked across the street, gripping the steering wheel, watching workers move in and out. And then I saw him. Daniel emerged from the building, his phone pressed to his ear, his brow furrowed in concentration. He looked busy, preoccupied, but still, he was right there. For the first time, I wasn't satisfied with just watching. My chest tightened. My hand reached for the door handle again. I could feel the moment swelling inside me, pressing against my ribs, demanding release. It's now or never, I told myself. But then panic set in. What would I say? "Hi, I'm Olivia, your sister?" The words sounded ridiculous in my head, like the opening line of some poorly written drama. What if he laughed? What if he walked away? What if he looked at me and saw nothing but a stranger trying to shatter the life he'd built? My breathing quickened, and I leaned back in the seat, gripping the edges of the chair until my knuckles went white. I was paralyzed between action and fear, my body trembling with the pressure of the choice. Minutes passed like hours. Daniel finished his call, handed papers to one of his workers, then walked toward his truck. He looked so normal, so ordinary, and yet to me, he was everything. And that's when it hit me. If I left again, if I let him drive away without knowing me, I would regret it for the rest of my life. I would become just like my mother, silent, withholding, hiding truths that deserve to be spoken. That realization shattered the fear holding me back. With my heart hammering and tears burning my eyes, I whispered to myself, "It's time." I pushed open the car door, the sound of it slamming behind me echoing in the lot. My legs shook as I crossed the street, each step heavy and surreal. Daniel was only a few yards away now, fumbling with his keys, unaware that the world around him was about to shift. Every nerve in my body screamed with fear and hope all at once. I was done hiding. I was about to meet my brother. The world around me seemed to fade as I crossed the parking lot. The sound of trucks, the murmur of voices, even the wind in the trees, all of it dulled to a low hum, as though time itself was holding its breath. My eyes locked on him. Daniel. My brother. He stood by his truck, tossing a set of keys into the front seat, unaware of the storm about to hit. His face was calm, his movements ordinary, but for me every detail felt monumental. Every step I took was weighted with 32 years of silence, 32 years of not knowing. "Excuse me," I heard myself say, my voice trembling. He turned, phone still in his hand, and looked at me. His eyes, those eyes, were the same shape as mine. For a moment I couldn't breathe. The resemblance was undeniable. It was like looking at a piece of myself I never knew was missing. "Yes? Can I help you?" His tone was polite but guarded, the tone of a man approached by strangers in a parking lot. My throat tightened. The words I had rehearsed in my head 100 times suddenly scattered like leaves in the wind. How do you tell someone they've had a sister their whole life and never knew it? My voice cracked. I don't even know where to start. His brows furrowed, confusion written across his face. Do I know you? That question cut deep. Of course he didn't. And yet, in some cruel twist of fate, I had known him my entire life, without ever meeting him. "No," I whispered, tears filling my eyes. "You don't know me. But you should have." He shifted uncomfortably, clearly unsettled. "I'm sorry, what are you talking about?" My chest heaved as I forced the words out. "My name is Olivia Bennett. My mother was Evelyn Bennett. She was your mother too." The silence that followed was suffocating. Daniel blinked at me, his expression blank at first, then flickering with shock, disbelief, and something harder to place. Fear, maybe. "What?" His voice was low, sharp. That's not possible." I fumbled in my bag, pulling out the photograph, the one of our mother holding him as a newborn. My hands shook as I held it out to him. "She never told you. She never told me either. But this is you. This is her. She gave birth to you before me. She kept you a secret your whole life." Daniel stared at the photograph, his jaw tightening. His hand hovered over it but didn't take it. He looked from the picture to me, then back again. "That's my mom?" His voice cracked, anger lacing the words. "No. My mom was Elaine Hartwell. She raised me. She's the only mother I've ever had." "I know," I said quickly, desperate to calm the storm building in his eyes. "She raised you, and I will never try to take that away. But you were born Evelyn's son. You're my brother, Daniel. I swear to you I'm telling the truth." He took a step back, shaking his head. "This is insane. You can't just show up out of nowhere and say something like that. Do you have any idea what you're saying? What this means?" "I do," I whispered, my tears spilling over. "Because it means everything to me, too. I lost her, and in losing her, I found you. I had no idea you existed until I found the papers, the letters, the hospital records. She hid you from me, from both of us. But I can't hide anymore. Not from you." Daniel finally took the photograph, staring at it as though it might burn him. His hands trembled, his face a war of emotions, anger, confusion, sorrow. Why wouldn't she tell me?" "Because she was ashamed," I said softly, "because she thought burying the past was the only way forward." But she was wrong. We're the ones left with her silence, and I don't want to live in that silence anymore. For a long time, He didn't speak. The air between us was heavy, thick with everything unspoken. My heart pounded so loudly I thought he could hear it. Finally, he looked at me, his eyes wet, his voice breaking. If this is true, if you're really my sister, then my whole life has been a lie. No, I said, stepping closer, my hand trembling as I reached toward him. Not a lie. Just incomplete. And I want to complete it. With you. If you'll let me. Daniel's breath came in ragged waves. He glanced at the photograph again, then back at me, his lips parting as though to speak. But no words came, only a raw, unguarded expression I will never forget. The look of a man whose entire world had just been turned upside down. In that moment, standing in the sunlight of a dusty parking lot, we were no longer strangers. We were siblings, torn apart by